Jabari Peddie, what's good, my brother?
What up, homie? What up? What up, man? How you doing?
I'm wonderful, man. How are you?
Man, I'm excited to be here, bro. We connected a couple of days ago, you and I, and it's all love. We was like forget social distancing. We connected. We was showing
Yeah, yeah.
love. I'm good, man. I'm really good. I'm just happy to be here and participate in this project with you. Um, Thank you, honored that you would even think to invite me, really happy to be here on behalf of the Teachers Lounge.
Yeah.
My brother Devin taking care of some family business right now. You know, he's a family man.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm representing the crew right now, man. But really happy that I'm here and
Oh,
excited about the conversation today, man. And always happy to build with you, brother. It's always love and energy together.
absolutely, man. Like I'm so happy to talk to you. We have a lot to talk about. We go way back. I feel like in a lot of ways we grew up together, not so much from
Yeah,
childhood,
we did.
but as young men. We met in college at the house.
I was yo, you're able to see
Yeah.
me looking right there, dog.
Shout out to
Always.
Morehouse. And we continued our friendship and watched each other grow. And so I definitely want to hear about your journey to where you are today. You've done so much from an education standpoint in our community and lifting up uplifting young Black and brown boys and girls. And I really want to give the audience an opportunity to get to know you as a human, but also understand what you're doing in the community as it relates to education. And so
Yeah.
with this conversation, I like to start with, a bit of an icebreaker. I asked all my guests, to tell me a story. So to start us off today, what story you got for me?
Yeah, I was I was going through the multiple stories that you and I share, and I was like, can't do that one. It's inappropriate. Gotta scratch that one. Yeah, I would keep it light. I gotta. We grown. Gotta
Yeah,
represent
yeah.
ourselves in the brand, right? No, but speaking to the brand, I'll tell the story of how Devin and I met.
Mhm.
Serendipitous, and also, of course, some levity, as we always try to, as part of our DNA. So I met Devin about, say, about 7 years ago. I've been in Boston for 8 years in total, and it was my second year in Boston which I met Devin. We had a mutual friend, and Buddy had invited me to a game night, and I was like, yeah, for sure, man. I ain't got nothing else to do. I feel like I'm the only Black person in Boston, which I now know is not true. But went to the game night, pulled up at this condo in Hyde Park, I think it was. And we parked the car. It's dark out. Get out the car, walking around, trying to find the crib. End up pressing a buzzer to try to get in. I think somebody opened the door, so we just slid in there. And we're walking around trying to find the place to go to this house party. And Devin comes around the corner, and he's standing there. I'm saying, shoulders broad. He's like, "Yo, y'all lost? You looking for something?" And me and the homie at the time was like, "Yo, son, you got a problem, bro? What's good? You are you lost? Are you looking for something?" And
Yeah.
he was like, "Fam, this is my crib, yo. What y'all looking for? You looking to go to a house party?" He was like, "Yeah, man. What's good?" He was like, "Yo, it's my house, dog. Y'all coming in or not?" So it was just mad funny how we met. It was all love, but it's like, brothers always ice grilling and standoffish at first.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
the same dude whose house we were going to chill and build community is the same dude who we was about to square off with, like, "Yo, what's good? You ice grilling me, was popping." And he
Right.
was like, "Yeah, this is my crib, man. Come on in." And I was like, "Oh yeah, bet. All love." And it's been a wrap ever since then, man. It was
Yeah.
just crazy because it's one of my longest relationships here in Boston, longest friendships here in Boston. And from that evening, I think it just really set the tone for the type of friends that we become, the type of brothers that we become. He came to my baptism. It set the tone for the type of partners, business partners that we have become in terms of collaborating, sharpening each other, pushing each other, battling each other to like really get the best out of each other, get the best out of ourselves, and put forward the best product for our collective and our community.
Mhm.
I just think back to that story, man, and how it was just like serendipitous engagement, and then it just blossomed to this really awesome thing that he and I share.
Dope, dope. Now, I definitely want to get into the teachers lounge because I think it's a beautiful, beautiful thing you all are doing. And the brainchild between you and Devin birthed something that I think is incredibly special, particularly in the Boston community. But I want to come back a little bit. I want to pull it back. And if you would, give me sort of, a synopsis on really how you got into education, right? And because when we went to Morehouse, we all went our separate ways when we graduated, and you chose education, the K through 12 realm to sort of build your career in. So I'm interested to see like why you chose that and why you've stayed in it for so long, because you have a lot of gifts and a lot of talents. You could do a lot of different things, but it feels, me knowing you, it feels like it's very intentional why you're doing this type of work. Yeah. And so tell me about sort of the inspiration behind getting into education and how that has evolved to what you're doing now.
Yeah, it's really an interesting tale. So what a lot of people don't know is that I actually didn't study education. I went into Morehouse as a business major, as most of us do, and quickly put that down when I was like, nah, these suit and ties aren't for me, man. But I studied English because I wanted to enter into a creative space. Lo and behold, after graduating, I went ahead and moved to DC. I went into corporate sales for a year. And part of that motivation was I grew up seeing my family struggle financially, and I didn't want that to be my story. And so I was like, I need to go to school, get the degree that's going to make me hella bread, and I need to get a job that's going to make me pay me ample. And so I got this job. I was making money, but I was also making myself miserable, and it wasn't satisfying work at all. And I was working to benefit somebody who was not, who didn't have my best interest at heart, and who didn't have my community's best interest at heart. And to this day, I call my cube mate, Tangi, shout out to her, whoever she is in this world. I call her my guardian angel because she saw my energy. She read the vibes, and she was like, yo, you don't look happy here. You should like leave or do something different. And she was like, you're really good with people. She said, why don't you go teach? And I was like, what, a prerequisite to being a teacher is being good with people? And so anyway, I applied to Teach for America, and I got into Teach for America, and I've been in education ever since. It's been 15 years later, and I've been teaching, I've been leading. I've now have the opportunity to create a community of teachers and leaders who are aligned and really about this equity in education work. And so, I started teaching using that English degree, and I was teaching middle grades language arts for about 5 years. And then I was really adamant about stepping into the role of a chief administrator. And that's what brought me to Boston. I had an opportunity to lead a school here in Boston. Mm-hmm. I've had the privilege to lead 3 schools in Boston. My driver for this is not what it initially was. When I initially got in, I was like, I just need to make ends meet right now because I've been out of work, so I quit that corporate job. I just need to make ends meet. I got a little bit of background. I used to be a tutor, mentor, and camp counselor. And I was like, so I can do this thing. But then as I stayed with the work and I saw more glaringly how serious and intense the problems are that affect the children who look just like you and me, bro. Mm-hmm. I can't turn my back on my community. I'm committed, I'm 10 toes down now for these children, for their families, for these communities. The problems that I experienced in Atlanta, the same problems that I experienced in New York when I was a child, the same problems that you experienced when you was a child in Boston, And mm-hmm. that was to me like, yo, this is a national problem. And like, I can't sit on the sidelines and watch my community be destroyed, my community be underserved without doing anything. And so that was me staying in education. It was my way of making a difference. As cliche as it sounds, it was my way of being a part of something and really giving back to the community that raised me.
Mm-hmm. And so what was it like from a culture shock perspective, or maybe it wasn't a culture shock, going from New York and growing up in New York, being educated in New York, and then transitioning to Morehouse and leaving Morehouse and looking at the education system as sort of like the farm system to higher education, right? Because a lot of us are just like, you know, we look at K through 12 as the sort of the prerequisite to the trajectory of where these young Black and brown minds are going to end up going, right? And so it was a blessing for us to experience Morehouse. And so I'm interested to think, like, to know how you left Morehouse, knowing like where you come from and where you are now, how important, you know, it is to see other educators like yourself, you know, in these classrooms, you know, in these communities, doing this kind of work. When we were in Morehouse, that's all we saw. You know what I mean? That's all we saw was us. And so what was the culture shock for you in that aspect?
So that's a really incredible and layered question. What I will say is that Morehouse was truly a defining moment in my life. And not only just Morehouse, but the city of Atlanta and its richness and its color. And I use that word color very intentionally because like Morehouse, there is Atlanta, there is very few places, no other place I'd say in the world that has that essence, that has such a dense population of African Americans, and has so many mobile and motivated and people who are about equity and justice. I've never experienced that in my life. So, you know, pulling that back, I say that I was raised in New York, but groomed in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I spent since I was 17 up until I was 25 in Atlanta. That's a significant chunk of my life there, you know. And it's oddly enough, I've been outside of New York now longer than I lived in New York. But Morehouse is really a unique space. It completely rewrites the narrative. It actually tells you that it doesn't need to rewrite the narrative. It tells you the true narrative. Media is the one that chooses to rewrite it and tell us these tales, these tall tales, these fairy tales about what Black men specifically are or what they are not. And Morehouse is the proof. And being in a space with so many like-minded brothers, this idea of iron sharpens iron was really a compelling piece. And that's what pulled me through those 4 years there. I mean, you know, I fooled around a little bit, got into financial trouble. As a sophomore, I had a choice, either like stop, disrupt my education, go back to New York, or figure out how to grind and make it work. And I figured out how to grind and make it work. And that's what pulled me through. My camaraderie, my brotherhood with you all pulled me through those last 3 years of Morehouse. And then being in, you know, fast forwarding to when I started teaching, the school that I taught at was right across the street from not even a housing project. I would say row homes, if you will. Some of those homes had no windows. Some of the homes had no doors. And this was right across the street from the school that was serving them. And so just to see like the abject poverty and like the under-resourced of those schools, I was like, this is not right. Fundamentally, this is a flawed system, and something has to be done about righting these wrongs that have been intentionally directed at our people. But it was the moment of seeing that this does not have to be life, because I was just 2 blocks away at Morehouse when I saw the richness of our culture, the dynamic nature of our culture, and then going to the school where I taught at and seeing like what was just some really destitute conditions, you know, and a lot of the conditions were intentional by design. And I was like, yo, this can't be right. Can't be right.
Yeah. And before you answer this next question, I just want you to make sure that you speak a little louder so the audience can hear you, because you're a little low. But you talked about Devin and your relationship with Devin. I'm interested to know, at what point in your relationship did you realize that business was an opportunity for you guys to grow? Because you have a lot of friends, you have a lot of brothers that you've come up with, that you've grown with, that may be in the same field as you, but you and Devin have connected in ways that is unique to any other relationships you have as it relates to the work that you're doing. So what was it about y'all's synergy that where you were able to cultivate a relationship to actually build a community in education, when many times, a lot of educators feel alone. You know, they feel like I'm the only one doing the work, particularly in a city where there's not a lot of us that look alike, right? You know, it's not in Atlanta where you can look out and see a whole bunch of folks that look like you in this space. And so you connected with someone who you confided in and trust, but then you decided to build a business, you know, with this person in a space where you are one of few or only in a lot of different scenarios. So what was it about Devin where you were like, I got this experience, I got this itch that I want to scratch, and this is the guy that I want to build this community with? What was it about y'all synergy that made that, you had that conviction?
It was exactly that. It was our alignment and gravitational pull towards this idea of building community. That's the thing that we shared in common. That's the thing that brought me to his house that evening for the game night, was feeling as if though there was a deficit in community, right? We as a people crave community. We crave connections. We crave the culture. And it was that hunger that brought me to his house that evening. It was that hunger that we shared, and that helped us to really think deeper about how can we be the answers to the question that was, what's popping tonight? What's going on tonight? You know, we got tired of asking that question. Or where are our people? We got tired of asking that question. We were like, we are here. There are numbers. We just got to show that. You know, we got to show our people that we are here. We got to show our people that this space is for us. I mean, Boston, honestly, is a historically Black city. When you think about so many of our civil rights leaders, right? These behemoths, right? They came from the city of Boston. So it's in the DNA that our people are here.
Yeah.
And again, it's this idea that we were both hungry for community. We both wanted to make Boston home. We wanted to make it home, and creating a space like the Teachers Lounge allowed us to recreate that home feeling. And so we don't really look at it. It is a business now, but what we would say is we are in the business of building communities.
Yeah. And did you feel, or have you connected with a lot of other educators who felt the same way in terms of, a lot of us are transplants, right? Like we've gone to schools all over the country, and then we congregate in Massachusetts, or in Boston in particular, because it's the mecca of education in a lot of ways. And so other Black and brown educators, was that the void that you were trying to fill, or was it just kind of like, oh, okay, well, you look like me, you look like me, you're looking for something to do, I'm looking for something to do, and we all teach, so let's create something? Or did it happen in a different way?
Yeah, all of these things were steeping in our minds at the same time. Honestly, it wasn't just let's create another club scene, because we are not the club scene, right? We never intended on being the club scene. What happened on that night, I'll bring it back to the game night. What happened that evening at the game night was, there was dope music being played, right? There was food that was just so tasty.
You already won. Dope music and food.
It's a wrap. It's a wrap. What else do you need? What else do you need, man? And then the conversation was just so rich, and we were like, this is exactly what we have been craving. You know, like we wanted that so bad, and how could we create a sustainable version of that? And that is what gave birth to the Teachers Lounge. That being insulated by the fact that we were in education, you know, we were educators. That being insulated by the fact that to our very core, we care about equity. We care about educating our Black and brown babies. We care about raising them up so they can be the next world leaders, the next civil rights leaders, that many of them were birthed and born here and did their work here in Boston. And that's the thing that really brought us to the point of like, this thing has to happen. We need to be the answer to that why.
And so walk me through a Teachers Lounge experience. So you got all these amazing Black and brown educators. They convene in a space. So I'm assuming, based upon your experience at the house party, there's got to be dope music. There's going to be some sort of nourishment. What else is a part? Because it's not the club. You've already said it's not the club. So what is it about?
Yeah. You know, what's interesting is that while it's not the club, wherever our people are, the energy is going to be just as vibrant.
Right.
But that's exactly it, though. It was, let's replicate and expand on this idea of the house party. You know, let's replicate and expand on this idea of the house party. And you use the word nourish, and that's a very powerful word, because that's the word that we use frequently when we think about the space that the Teachers Lounge provides. It's a space where you can go and get nourished. You can be intellectually fed, you can be psychologically fed, emotionally fed. And what I mean is the conversations that we facilitate, or rather that we amplify the voices of our collective to facilitate, because we don't ever profess to have all the answers, right? And we want to take the spotlight off of us and place it on the community, because that's what it's about. It's about not Devin and Jabari being here and pulling community together, but rather the collective and that force that happens, right? It's like this centrifugal force. Once the community comes out, it pulls more people in, and those people pull more people in, and then the energy just continues to spool. And
regardless of you and Devin, you know, it's gonna happen organically. Yeah.
Right. Regardless of us, you know, people don't come here for us; they come here for the community, and that's dope. That's cool with us. That's exactly what we want. Because again, we're in the business of building community, not in the business of building our personal brands. That's not ever what it's about. But yeah, you come to the event and you get nourished, right? You get fed, as I said, professionally, psychologically, emotionally. You know, you get your, you can physically, people are there dancing, they're grooving with each other. You get fed. Like, you know, we've been fortunate to partner with businesses, specifically businesses that are either owned, operated, and occupied by people of color, or that are intentional about amplifying the voices of people of color. And shout out to Saber. Eddie, amazing dude. He believes in us, he's worked out a situation with us that allows us to create a sustainable model. So people go there, they get drink tickets, you know, they get their spirits, and they get really awesome food that is on Saber's menu. So that is what you'll experience when you're there. You will walk out being fed and more nourished than when you enter that space.
And why is that nourishment so important in doing this work? Because there's obviously a need for Black educators in our school system, but I feel like what has not been talked about is the support of those Black educators, right? It's one thing to have a Black educator in a class teaching Black and brown babies, but what is the support system of those Black and brown educators to be able to continue to do the work that is so challenging, particularly in these under-resourced school districts, cities, communities, not just in Boston, but across the nation? Why do you feel it's so important for that nourishment, not only in Teachers Lounge, but just in Black and brown educators, period?
Yeah. Now we're transitioning to something I'm incredibly passionate about, and that is the recruitment, the revitalization, and the retention of educators of color. And that is rooted in bodies of research, mounds of data that prove that children, specifically children of color, are more successful if they had only one interaction with an educator of color. And so we're like, if they can be successful by having just one interaction with an educator of color, having one teacher of color throughout their career, why not let's multiply that experience? Let's guarantee their achievement. Let's guarantee their outcomes. And that's part of our vision. Through the Teachers Lounge, we seek to drive unprecedented student outcomes. And simply by putting a teacher of color in front of them, and not just putting them there, keeping them there. We want to sustain our educators of color, because the work is hard. The work by itself is incredibly hard. Your color or not, being an educator is incredibly hard. The hours are long. It's incredibly fatiguing academically, right? You're always thinking, you're always adjusting, you're always learning, you're always applying. That cycle never stops. So it's very draining on teachers. And then you add the fact that you got a little bit of melanin. Now your children are looking at you like, oh, I see you. I see me and you, right? Or you're looking at our family like, yo, same, we identify. Or
Mm.
your peers who don't identify as you are looking at you for answers. They're looking at you to be the deans or the culture leaders of your class. Like so much of this blind or invisible tax, rather, is placed upon the shoulders of educators of color. And given our proximity to the problem, because many educators of color, not all, but many of them have shared experiences. Right? They've experienced the poverty. They've experienced the discrimination. They've experienced the prejudice. They've experienced I'm counting you out. And because they feel all of that, that weight is on them, and they bring that weight with them to the schools.
Mm.
And while we look at teachers as heroes, they're humans who do heroic things, and they get tired. And we just wanted to create a space, again, that centrifugal force, where we're continuously pouring back into them so that they can have the energy to push forward and either stay in the classroom if they so choose, which is phenomenal work. I always say that leadership doesn't mean you're a building administrator. Building administrator means exactly that. You are a building administrator. Leader is somebody who's in the classroom leading our children and showing them that things are very possible for them.
Mm. And so, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like, based upon what you just said, that you're really focused, you're getting away from the deficit framework and looking at what the students don't have, but looking at opportunities of what they do have and amplifying that to be like, well, if this one teacher is able to make an impact on this young person's life, let's figure out a way to see what that particular educator is doing in their class, what's a part of their resiliency and their efforts, and let's galvanize around that and replicate it in all these other schools. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think to that point, it's really important that we start to view our children as an asset, and we start to view our children from the perspective of what do they have versus what don't they have. That's going to make for a much richer learning experience. And that takes work in and of itself. That takes educators themselves to really interrogate their own biases that they have towards our children of color, and more broadly that they have towards people of color.
And in creating this space at the Teachers Lounge, what is sort of the themes that have bubbled up, at least in the Boston community, around what educators are going through? Because I know I can't imagine that it's just a grief fest, right? You know, everyone's just
not at all.
So there are very intentional conversations and dialogues that you have presented, and you have like a whole itinerary of what's going to happen in that evening. So what are some of the things that educators are talking about that they want, or they desire, or they want to continue to do? Because I think, you know, I'm a parent. A lot of us don't actually know what the teachers are going through. We look at the performance of the child and the academic performance of the school, whether it be MCAS, standardized testing, different things like that. But we rarely talk about what the teachers are actually doing to be able to get to that product. And the product is the student learning outcome of our children. And so what are some themes that you all have found in the many events that you've done in your programming?
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you said it's not a grief fest, because that's not what it is. Mm-hmm. It's a space, it's an affinity space. It's a space full of empathy. It's a space full of creative ideas and ingenuity. And one of the things, well, there's multiple through lines and trends that emerge, but what seems to always be centered is this idea of community. Is this idea of, I would stay longer if there were more people present who look like me. So it's about mirrored representation. Educators of color want to have peers who identify with them. They want to have building administrators, principals, assistant principals who identify with them. And again, it's this mirrored reflection, because what it does for them is it creates a safety net. They don't feel like they're on an island by themselves, and they feel like they're in this work with the community and pushing forward together. So it's this idea of representation. It's this idea of inclusion, like me being included in the decision making in my school. This idea of it's done with me, not to me. And I think the other idea is access. And do I have access to the resources I need to be the best educator I can possibly be? Do I have access to the opportunities, if I so choose, to push my career further along. And so it's representation, inclusion, access are some of the things that are constantly talked about at the Teachers Lounge. And not just talked about, you said, like grievingly. It's more like, how can we actually drum up some solutions to bring back to our different spaces so that we can really push forward this idea of equity.
So in some ways, it feels like that space is an opportunity for professional development, right?
Yeah.
You know, in these conversations and understanding who has what resources and what resources are available to them, there's a component of a professional development that I think speaks to your idea of wanting to retain, you know, these individuals. Because if you feel stuck or you're not going to break through whatever your particular goal is, then you're probably going to pick another profession.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's exactly that. We offer professional development. Devin and I have led workshops before, but it's not about Devin and I. It's about amplifying the voices of our community, amplifying the voices of our collective. So we have asked and leveraged the talents and the expertise of the members of our community to lead discussions, to lead critical friends groups, to lead problems of practice, and with that, or what, as we say, get it popping, right? Problems of practice. And what that is, one of our community members would share a challenge that she is experiencing. And together as a community, we would be in a think tank and solve. We would ask the clarifying questions, we would ask the probing questions, and we'd offer up our solutions. She would then like take a running list of the solutions that were offered and really think about which ones are going to be the most applicable in her space. She'd share it out and then report back. And so that is what has been a cornerstone of our work together at the Teachers Lounge. Again, we talked about this idea of being nourished, right? We feed you professionally, and we feed you in all those other ways we talked about. And one of those ways is by leaning on the talents and expertise of our members of our collective.
That's beautiful. And so it's no secret that we are in a sort of a dual pandemic. You know, one being the COVID-19, and other being racial injustice, social justice around racial issues. How do you think that is affecting you as a human, Jabari, right? Yeah. But also in your role in the community as an educator?
Yeah. It's a heavy question. Personally, as Jabari, not as Jabari, co-founder of the Teachers Lounge, as Jabari, you know, my family was personally affected by the coronavirus and COVID-19. And that was a lot to process, and still show up and be Jabari, the professional, still show up and be Jabari, co-founder of the Teachers Lounge. You know, you're wearing these multiple hats, and rarely do we ever tend to the hat that is on our person, on our being. And what I realized is that I was running myself to depletion, running on an empty tank. And I had to take some time to pull back and really heal myself. And part of that healing was connecting with family. Part of that healing was connecting with myself, praying, meditating, was building myself up, doing the necessary research and reading so that I could retool and enter back into these spaces, enter back into these other bodies. Jabari, the professional, the principal, and Bari as a co-founder of the Teachers Lounge, so that I can give it 100%. And it has been incredibly taxing, right? It's not normal to see the public lynching of somebody who looks very similar to me. And that has happened far too often. I'm not desensitized to it, and I won't be desensitized to it. And I think it's dangerous if we are ever desensitized to it. So every time moments like that happen, I take it personally. And I think, what can me as a person do? What can I as a person do to help right these imbalanced scales and really push forward this idea of equity, right? And making our any space that I'm in, any space in which I have influence over, what can I do to make it?
Yeah, yeah. Um, also throughout this pandemic, we lost two civil rights giants in the past, couple of weeks.
Yeah,
And in many ways, they weren't educators in a traditional sense, being in a classroom, but they damn sure taught us a lot. And
yeah.
so as an educator, how have you sort of internalized the work of Congressman Lewis and the others and our ancestors in pushing our culture forward in a space where for a lot of us is almost the most important aspect of living is being educated. Like that can make or break, the success of a child.
Yeah.
And so looking at where you've come from, looking at these giants passing, because, Father Time, waits for no one, but we are the next generation of those giants, right? We are now at the forefront of leadership. And you've now transitioned into a leadership role over the past few years as a principal. And so now you're sort of like out of the classroom and have more agency in terms of, how you're going to lead an organization, how you're going to lead, an institution of education. How have you taken, all that what's happening and looking at our past leaders and internalize that and say, this is what I plan to do moving forward for our young Black and brown minds?
Yeah. I think about the motto "Good Trouble," and how the work of the Teachers Lounge is good trouble. The narrative is that we don't exist, educators of color, people of color in the city of Boston. We do exist. The narrative is that they don't want us in our spaces. Yes, you do, because you want this dollar, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
So we are actively disrupting what was the norm by creating spaces where so many of us can convene and really showcase our power and our intellect. That's that good trouble. When I think about my roles as a principal, I think about that as good trouble as well, right? I am showing children that what the media portrays as the image of a Black man is antithetical to who I am, right? I am, in fact, one of the many of us who are in positions in which they can use their influence for tremendous good. And I think about just the sheer work of me educating and my team educating children. That's good trouble as well, right? The system is stacked against them. It's designed for them not to thrive. It's designed for them not to have incredible achievement and outcomes. And we are doing the exact opposite of that. Leading teachers and a team who are really about putting in front of our children some really dense and rigorous instruction that's going to open their minds to a world of possibility. The Teachers Lounge, that good trouble again. We are about the business of sustaining and revitalizing educators of color so that they are committed and wanting to stay in the field and grow in their capacities. That's that good trouble.
Yeah. And what advice would you give to parents in this? Because you've seen a lot of different angles. One, you've been in the classroom, you've taught young people. Then you've created a community of other educators, so you've heard of what's going on in the classroom. Then you've also had leadership roles in leading an organization of education, an institution of education. Now we are at COVID. Now we're in this, racial unrest in our society. For parents, in the midst of all this, one thing that we want to know is, are our babies gonna be all right? Like in the place that they're at when they're not with us is in school, right? Yeah. And so what advice would you give to parents, not to comfort them, but to give them some sort of like insight on what they can expect over the next year, what you think they can expect? Because no one has the real answers, right? None of us have the answers, but do you have any advice or any insights on what we can expect, in this upcoming academic year?
Yeah. So my advice is that parents, we, educators, schools, institutions, we work for you. So you have the power to make demands. You need to demand from your schools, from the leaders of those schools, clarity. You need to demand excellence, the very best that they can offer. And anything less than that is unacceptable, because parents in wealthier neighborhoods are getting so many concessions, are getting so many resources given to them. And that's not right, obviously. That is racist.
Right,
You
right.
need to make the demands, parents. Like, we work for you. Change the paradigm, flip it, right? Don't just sit there and wait for the schools to give you shoddy information. Demand that they give you clear, consistent, and transparent conversations and information about what's happening at the schools. On the school front, I know that there aren't any decisions yet. And it's a really difficult time, so we should try to be empathetic with some of the leaders of our schools and our institutions and our districts, but we still should demand from them urgency. Right? Again, parents, demand from them urgency. And what we can expect is that there will be some version of a hybrid model. There will be remote learning coupled with in-person learning. And you can expect that, you should expect that you will be given resources to help supplement the instruction that is happening from the schools. And you should also demand and expect that you yourself are being educated. You yourself are being, your capacity is being built so that you can help to better supplement the instruction that is happening. Because nobody's talking about those barriers, right? Nobody's talking about that invisible tax. Like, if you're a parent, you got to work your own job to provide for your family. The least you can do in school is show me how to effectively use the tools, how to effectively understand the curriculum, so again, I can supplement what's happening in the school building.
Right. Without the assumption that the parent is actually working from home.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because a lot of that is the assumption, oh, the parent is home, give it to the parent, they'll figure it out. Meanwhile, there's a lot of us, our parents, that are on the front lines that they can't actually be at home to teach that child day to day, being empathetic with those circumstances.
And if you think about it, many people of color within the neighborhoods that our schools are servicing, the inner city, their parents are in service positions. Their parents, as you said, are on the front lines.
Right.
So that is also why Black Americans are at such a high risk of being exposed to the coronavirus and COVID-19, because they don't have the luxury to be working from home. They have to get up, they have to earn that dollar, they have to go out and expose themselves to the virus. And so we can't make the assumption that parents are at home. And if we make the assumption that our parents are at home, then we also need to assume that their income is being compromised in some way. And so schools, again, need to figure out how we can meet our families where they are and how we can supplement the resources that they need.
Oh. And how can people connect with the Teachers Lounge? How can we support? What can we do as a community to continue to make sure that this space never goes away? It only grows.
Yeah. There's something really beautiful and powerful about the word of mouth. There's something really beautiful and powerful about telling about anecdotes and telling people your experience that you've encountered at the Teachers Lounge. There's nothing that can replace an authentic experience and one that's going to be compelling. On the technical side, you can of course support us by visiting our website, which is theteachersloungema.org. Again, that's theteachersloungema.org. You can visit our website, and there's a little donation button that you can click, and you can certainly make a contribution. And the contribution, no matter how small or how great, is a contribution nonetheless that's going to help us to fund and push this work forward. For this upcoming season, we've got some really awesome things planned, and we're thinking about bringing more talent to the forefront, showcasing more talent, bringing more pundits in the field to speak with our collective and work with our collective and facilitate workshops for our collective. And as much as I would like, that's not really cheap. And so, if you can make a contribution, that would be tremendous. And if you can't, still dope. The best way you can contribute is to show up, be present in our
So
spaces.
this is a nonprofit.
We are currently seeking nonprofit status. Yes.
Okay.
This close. This close.
We're gonna manifest it. It's gonna be one.
It's gonna happen. Yes. 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 We're in that process right now. So, and then again, like add to our community. And what I mean is simply show up, join, follow us on Instagram at the Teachers Lounge MA. Participate in our virtual events. You know, we're going to be virtual for the foreseeable future. Prayerfully, we come through this stronger, better, not just as the Teachers Lounge Incorporated, but as a world community. And hopefully we'll be back in the same spaces together, two-stepping, sharing some spirits and just having a great time.
And just because I don't think I made it clear, is it K through 12? Is it K through 5? Like what is sort of the demographic of the educators that are involved in the Teachers Lounge? Is it higher ed? Who is it?
Educators.
Okay.
If you are in the field of education, or if you support the work of an educator, anything along or within that orbit, then you are welcome to come to that space. Educators of color and friends, and the and friends is any person who considers themselves an ally in this work. You are welcome into that space. And again, we try to create, or rather to eliminate as many barriers as possible to creating community and sustaining community. Every event is free of charge. Every experience is free of charge. And the reason being is that you all have been taxed enough. Educators have been taxed enough. We're not going to tax your pockets anymore. And so we make the events free to all educators. If you consider yourself an educator, then come through, join us, have a great time. If you consider yourself a friend, an ally in this work, an accomplice in this work, come through, join us, add to the community. Your energy and your perspectives are unique to you and are only going to power the creativity that happens in that space.
Dope. Well, brother, I love what you're doing, man. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you.
And I learned a lot, and I'm excited to see where you're going next. And I just want you to hear from me, from one brother to another, I love you, man.
Love you too, bro.
Man. I see you. I admire the work that you're doing. We need you. And please continue. We got much, much, much work to do.
Thank you, bro. I appreciate that. That's heartfelt.
Yeah.
And that's received, man. I know that that's mirrored back on you, bro. We 15 years in the game. How long we know each other now, man?
Right, since 17, 18, man. It's been a long time.
A long time, man. That's 20 plus years. I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's not math. That's 20 plus years we've known each other. So yeah, we got some skin in the game, man. But mad love, support everything you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. You are a large part of the reason why I moved to Boston. You helped me to see this place as possible, and I appreciate that, man. And this work that you do right now, I'm just trying to catch it to you, man. You're always evolving, bro. You like a chameleon. Every time I'm like, I'm up to Jay's level, he's on to something new. I'm like, he's scratching my head like, what do you gotta do, man? So
we're growing, man. We're growing.
Trailblazing, brother. Keep trailblazing. And I love the series too. I've watched every one. You got a bunch of dynamic people, man, and the spectrum is so plentiful. It's really awesome work that you're doing to like center and amplify the voices of our beautiful community here in Boston, man. So keep up the good work, man.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, man. You have a good rest of your day and keep shining, King. Keep shining.
Peace, man. Peace.
All right. Peace.